I've always been a fan of history. It's one of my favourite subjects when I was at school. I think the other thing as well to say is that we should learn from history. You know, this is a standard phrase that you'll hear again and again. And what I think is the history that you're really obliged to learn from is your own history. So thinking about my life, I was born in 1965 in Rochdale. So up until the peasants pantomime, life in Britain was pretty easy. You know, there was not much hardship at all, really. Okay, a bit of unemployment in the 1980s, but still, you know, in the whole scheme of human history, it wasn't a bad time to be alive. That's not to say though that our taxes were used by the British government to do some pretty terrible things abroad. You know, killing, murdering people abroad. But you know, like many people, shame on me, I kind of turned a blind eye because it wasn't really affecting me at the time. Anyway, um, I've got back into reading since about the summer. I've been reading quite often, and there's a famous book under the North Star, and it's in Finnish. It's written by this guy called Vaino Linna, and at the moment I'm just reading. I've read it's a trilogy. I've read the first two. One day I'll read them in Finnish. At the moment I'm just reading them in English. Anyway, lots of things to say about these books, but it basically traces out Finland's history from the early 19th century, initially through like a farming community. And it's really interesting because it's not just a novel with, you know, with characters doing normal character things in a fictitious novel. It's also a bit similar to sort of Ayn Rand in many ways, in that some of the people that she describes are almost like blueprints for how people should behave. You know, like almost like people who have superhuman qualities. You know, for example, in the first book, there's this guy called Jussi Koskela, and he basically at that time Finland was run by Swedes, effectively, people from Sweden, and they were the kind of the aristocracy. And this guy approaches a local Lutheran priest, and basically he manages to negotiate clearing a swamp, and if he clears a swamp, he can then grow grain on it. So he does that. The whole book, it's probably sounds a bit boring, but basically it's just a book about graft, really, how hard this person works, and the merits of working hard, and the merits of family life, and this guy's struggle against nature, which is a reoccurring theme in Finland. The second book is quite interesting because it goes through what happened when Finland became independent. And prior to that, there was a civil war in Finland. And the origins of the civil war, I think, when I was reading this, I started to get a little bit worried about Britain in particular, and could something similar happen in Britain? There was a lot of bloodshed during this Finnish civil war, and certainly I'm sure most Brits will be completely ignorant about what happened. So what I'm going to do is just explain to you what happened in this book, which was basically, although it's fiction, the characters are fictional, the events that happened did happen. There was a civil war in Finland that started in 1917. Okay, so at that time then, there was a large percentage of Finnish people who were tenant farmers. They didn't really have any property rights, so they weren't allowed to own things. All the property was owned by this kind of Swedish aristocracy. They were also under Russian rule at that time, and the Russians almost like were playing second fiddle to the Swedes. This Swedish aristocracy was incredibly strong, and in return for working the land, these Finnish tenant farmers had to do what was called rent days. So they had to go and work for maybe 2 or 3 days a week on the aristocrats' land. So and they were unpaid for that, and in return for that, they could then do their tenant farming for the other like 3 or 4 days of week. So this, and again, what used to happen from time to time with this Jussi Koskela, the aristocrats would steal some of the land that he'd cleared away from the swamp. So, for me as an economist, I found that quite interesting about just the bitterness that created, and just how important private property rights are. Obviously Klaus Schwab wants to end that. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. But history tells me that will be a very, very difficult thing for him to pull off, because it tends to seizures of private property, or denying people private property rights, it doesn't tend to go down well. People will fight and die for that. That's a hill that they will choose to die on. Anyway, so basically what happens is, towards the beginning of the 20th century, there's like a socialist movement in Finland, and it's more like communist, really. So these ideas are coming in across the Russian border, and at that time there was Russia was, through the Tsar, was Finland was like a puppet of the Tsar, basically. And what happened was that there was eventually there was a revolution over these lack of private property rights. The peasant farmers, they just had enough, and they basically, when the Russian Revolution happened in 1917, they also decided to have their own revolution in Finland. And there's the Bolsheviks in Russia sent arms over to Finland, and they created this kind of what was called the Red Guard, which was essentially a communist militia. And this Red Guard managed to gain control of most of southern Finland, Helsinki and Tampere, in particular Turku, I think, as well. And obviously the aristocrats, there was a lot of bloodletting. There was a lot of the Red Guard murdered a lot of these aristocrats because there was just this incredible seething resentment. And I think a lot of that resentment is still here today, isn't it? Under woke and under socialism. Socialism. What socialists tend to do is that they blame, their own poor position on somebody else. And in the case of these tenant farmers, okay, they weren't being treated right, but they react to this situation by killing a lot of these aristocrats. So in the north of the country, that's still under the control of these Swedish-born aristocrats, there's a fight back. They form the White Guards. So the Finnish Revolution is between the Red Guards, communists, and the White Guards, which are the traditional power base of aristocracy, basically. In the end, the Whites defeat the Reds because Germany also assists the White Guards. They bring troops as well as arms, and they use those to defeat the Red Guards. There's also conscription, as to the White Guards introduced conscription. So a lot of the kind of peasants in the north are forced to fight against their brothers and cousins who are in the Red Guard in the south. So at the end of this, when the Red Guard are defeated, then there's like another round of almighty bloodletting. And just reading it, it's absolutely terrible, because, even in some villages, there's this splits, some people were with the Reds, some people with the Whites. And it just reminded me, of like, this sort of thing that I remember seeing in the 80s and 90s as a kid, these cycles of violence, between the Jews and the Palestinians, or between Irish Catholics and Irish Protestants. And I can't help but think that, like, Satan really likes that. He likes resentment. And you get these cycles of violence. So the Red Guards committed atrocities. So when the Reds were defeated, the whites come in, and then they get payback too, which means more death, more misery. And yeah, it's quite shocking because in this book, you have accounts of people who lived together, who used to get on fine with each other, who then just basically slaughter each other. And it's terrible stuff. Basically, it's a damning indictment of human nature, I guess. Of course, I know some people in the comments will say, well, this is what happened in former Yugoslavia. And I would say, yeah. We never really talked much about that, or it wasn't really featuring that much in the news, certainly like where these hatreds sort of came from. But it's not good. So this is a bit rambly, I know, but what I'm worried about is, could that happen again in the UK, between like the woke people or the Britney Spears fans, the normies, and then the other 30% of people who didn't want to go to the concert, who are far right extremists because they believe in things like free speech and private property rights and individual freedom and liberty. Or could it be something intergenerational? Because again, there's a lot of resentment about boomers and private property, isn't there? And house prices, that young people are fed all these narratives that they'll never be able to buy a house, and it's all the fault of boomers. So yeah, hatred isn't good. It can inspire violence, and then you get into these destructive cycles of violence. And in the first book of this trilogy, everyone gets on fine. In this village, people work hard and they found a country called Finland. And then in the second book, it all falls apart in an extremely bloody civil war, and it all happens very, very quickly. That was the other thing that shocked me as well when I was reading this. And then you read about what actually happened, and yeah, it's a pretty accurate portrayal of how Finland disintegrated into civil war. So my message, I guess, is forgiveness, isn't it? This is, again, when I was reading this book, I was thinking about Jesus Christ, and Jesus stressed how important it was to forgive other people. And certainly what I don't want to see is, for example, mob rule. At some point, if it's not already happened, the truth about the Britney Spears and the boosters it's coming out, isn't it? It will come out. It already has come out. And at some stage, there'll be intense anger amongst those that went to the concerts towards people in the November Hotel Sierra who actually took money. They got their salary, didn't they, from the November Hotel Sierra in return for taking people to these concerts. In many cases, the people taking them to the concerts didn't actually want to go to the concerts themselves. I think there was 100,000 of people in the November Hotel Sierra who didn't want to go to the concerts. But I just wonder how many of them actually took people to concerts themselves that they weren't prepared to go to. So, yeah, what I don't want is like for Britain to descend into mob rule, but I sense that once these normies kind of like really grasp what was done to them, they could unleash massive social unrest that could lead to some sort of revolution, and then you have these horrible cycles of violence that occur. So that's all I want to say today. Well, let's call this Learn from History.